Hi, guys, and welcome to the first ever episode of Alamat, where we translate and narrate Philippine myths, urban legends, and scary stories from the Philippines to share to the world. As this is the very first episode, I'll be honest with you guys, I am very excited to start off this show with you. Let's start with the first story from Ako Cabs on the R Philippines subreddit. My friends and I decided to go out of town during the Holy Week last year. We went to Bawang, La Union, because my friend has a rest house there, and it also has a nearby beach. We left Manila at Thursday midnight and arrived there at noon. Nothing really happened during the day, but when we decided to drink that night, something really strange happened. We were drinking on the balcony, enjoying the view of the farmlands that surround the house. It was dark outside, but it was a good thing that the moon was bright enough to let us see the trees and the land. Anyway, at one point, we started to try and scare each other while drinking. We were four people then: me, my friend, the owner of the house, and the neighbor of the owner. I asked the neighbor if there are any creepy phenomena in La Union, and he said, "There are no ghosts here, but I heard that there are witch doctors." When he said that, I looked to my left and saw a shadow of a woman by the window. I didn't mind it at first, but then my friend asked me, "Bro, did you see that?" I then replied, "The shadow? Yes." When the owner and the neighbor heard that, we all went down and tried to sleep in one of the rooms there. The next day, which was Good Friday, we woke up because the relatives of the owner came. They brought with them some food, drinks, and some groceries. We got to know the family and learned that the owner's sister does not have a good relationship with her husband. That night, the owner's sister and her husband fought because she learned that the husband had an affair. They shouted and threw things at each other, and we couldn't do anything about it since we were guests. The next day, Black Saturday, the house was quiet due to the fight the night before. We did the same routine since it was our vacation. We ate, we went to the beach, played some cards, and we drank. In the afternoon, the owner's sister joined us by the beach to calm down. She only drank a shot and swam in the water. And when we were heading home, we thought, the peace is nice. I hope that the night will continue to be this peaceful. We thought wrong. When 9 p.m. came, the sister of the owner went crazy. We were in one of the rooms and we would hear her shout at her husband. We thought that she was just mad because of the trauma due to her husband's actions. The owner of the house stormed into our room and asked for our help. We were surprised, but we followed him down to where his sister was. When we were nearing his sister, we finally understood what she was shouting. It made my knees buckle as she was saying, "Mom, please help me. They're hurting me." We saw her forming black marks on her body. While her mom was hugging her, the other relatives were holding her down. Her father was putting strands of a broom between her toes. We didn't believe that witch doctors existed before this. The father ordered the owner to call over one of the neighbors that works as an exorcist. And when the exorcist came, we were told to throw salt at the doors and at the windows. Then we were instructed to start praying the rosary so that the spirit would leave the sister's body. When she calmed down, the main door of the house opened by itself. When we checked, we saw that there was a ponytail by the door. When we went back into the room, the exorcist told us that a wandering spirit was dwelling in the house because the house was usually empty. As much as we tried, we couldn't get any sleep that night. The second story is about an experience that a group of friends encountered while on their drive home. The story is by Yogurt and Peanut on Reddit. One night, when we were heading home from an out of town trip, a middle aged woman with two kids, one girl and one boy, stopped us. The kids were aged around 6 to 8 years old, and they were asking if they could hitch a ride because they couldn't get any vehicles to commute home. We were hesitant at first, but we felt bad for the children since they were crying. They joined us in the back of our pickup. But just to give you guys an idea on how many we were at the back of the pickup, it was me, two friends, plus the newcomers, which were the mom and two children. It was a bit troublesome at first because the kids kept on crying, but the mom was able to calm them down after some time. I am actually a particularly observant person and noticed that the young girl was wearing a Powerpuff Girls shirt, but the colors were wrong. Bubbles was wearing a green shirt and Buttercup was wearing a blue shirt. And I also noticed that the young boy was holding on to a fidget spinner. After 10 minutes, the mom asked to be dropped down by one of the waiting sheds near their house. When we saw the shed, we noticed that it was the only place with a light on, and every other lamppost didn't have any light. And after dropping them off, we passed by a group of people bundled by the road. We slowed down to see what was up, and we found out that a tricycle and a motorcycle collided. We tried to peek, and I was surprised to see the bloody bodies of the mom and two kids that we dropped off earlier. I saw the same Powerpuff Girls shirt and the fidget spinner that the boy was clutching. This happened back in 2017, and this is the most unforgettable story that has ever happened to us. We still talk about it whenever we go out for drinks today. Our final tale for today is called I Used to Work for a Charity in the Philippines. I Never Want to Help People Again. I've always yearned to help others, to save the needy from suffering. You see, the world doesn't need imagined monsters. Plenty of real ones haunt humanity every day. Disease, poverty, oppression, all scarier than the demons in horror stories. Or so I thought. 7 years ago, the charity I worked for sent me to the Philippines to help a few villages prepare evacuation plans in case of flooding. The poverty was bad enough. The first village lay next to a dirty, trash-soaked river. The nipa houses rested on stilts that stood upon caked mud amid a sprawling jungle. Two opposing tree stumps with perched buckets is how I describe the basketball court. Despite this, the villagers exuded joy. During the afternoon siesta, men would gather on plastic tables and pass around coconut wine while playing cards or mahjong. And in the evening, they'd congregate in the village captain's house and sing 90s classics on the karaoke machine. Sometimes until the roosters crowed. They got the nipa wood for the houses from mangroves that lined the river's edge, like a wall of roots. As strong as the material was, a fierce flood could annihilate an entire nipa village in an hour. A successful evacuation requires an easy path to higher ground. And so, from the comfort of my hotel suite in Cebu, I drew a route through the jungle and up the nearby mountain, which loomed over the village like a titan. Aside from that, I spent my time at the hotel phoning corporate social responsibility heads, usually while drinking whiskey in the bathtub, and after much cajoling, raised funds for rowboats, life vests, canned food, loudspeakers, and other essentials for surviving flood. It was all going smoothly until I drove back to the village and presented my plan. The village captain, whom everyone called grandmother because she was the eldest, had prepared a feast for me, which she cooked in literal holes in the grass. No one here is old enough, she said, while we were having lunch under the billowing black clouds. But I remember what happened at that mountain. I loved eating on a banana leaf, but cupping the rice and meat with my hands still seemed so awkward. Good things, I hope. She hesitated, chewing her food slowly, then shook her head and said, Aswang lived there. I didn't speak Tagalog, nor the local language of that region. I simply stared back, my eyebrows raised, and said, I'm sorry, what's an aswang? The village captain told me a story. When she was a young girl, the village was located on the other side of the mountain, away from the river. And it was well off, because the men worked at the mountain's tin mine, and the price of tin was high. But strange things began to happen. A few men who went to work in the mine didn't come out quite the same. Some of the wives, specifically the pregnant ones, would claim that creatures called aswang had taken their husbands' forms. They'd wake up in the night and see their husbands staring intently at their swollen bellies, slobber dripping from their mouths. I laughed in the village captain's face, thinking that it was a joke. How rude and foolish I was. But I had 4 other villages to deal with during that trip. I'm afraid there's no time to change the evacuation plan. Typhoon season is here, after all, I said. The village captain persisted. Because of those aswang, no baby was born in the village for a whole year. The mothers always disappeared before they could give birth. Only when the tin mine went bust and we relocated to this river did things return to normal. I said, I understand your fears, but it's the only high ground for miles. It even has caves for shelter, and it's an easy climb. Even though I didn't, I said, I understand your fears, but it's the only high ground for miles. It even has caves for shelter, and it's an easy climb. There's simply no better place to save everyone's lives. The other villagers I talked to didn't share her concern, which reassured me because if they believed such a ridiculous tale, I'd be forced to find another site. I stayed overnight, intending to practice my evacuation plan with everyone in the morning, before I moved on to the next village, which was on a different island. But we'd never get to practice it. At sunrise, the sky bellowed and opened. Wind screamed and howled, as if some mighty god were blowing upon the world and flinging coconut and papaya trees like twigs. The bulging river overflowed past the mangroves, and the stilts supporting the nipa huts weren't sturdy enough to keep the water from sucking them up. The world knows this catastrophe. The world knows this catastrophe as Typhoon Haiyan, but they call it Typhoon Yolanda there. Over 6,000 people died. Another 1,700 went missing. One of them because of me. Though I earnestly wanted to help, when the floodwaters surged with the wind's scourge, I wished I were back in my comfy hotel suite. Still, I did my job. As soon as the storm began, I gathered the villagers at the basketball court. Then we marched along a dirt path, through the jungle and toward the mountain. I ensured the children, elderly, and pregnant women among us walked in front so they wouldn't lag behind. Because I'd scouted it a few days ago, I knew that the trek to and up the mountain would be straightforward. A winding path brought us high enough where we could wait out the storm. Watching the villagers huddle together amid the caverns, still cheerful despite the calamity, I finally felt I'd done some good. As I passed around blankets, canned food, and life vests, I realized how much more fulfilling this was than phoning corporate heads while drinking whiskey in a tub. It all started to go wrong when a young man came up to the village captain and me. I'll never forget his pockmarked and narrow face and the way he waved his arms in panic, as if he were trying to block a basketball shot. The village captain, translating his pleading, said, "His wife went to relieve herself and now she's missing." I pounced at another chance to help, to fulfill my heart's yearning, so I organized a search party. Amid apocalyptic rain and screeching wind, I and several other men and women scouted the mountain. When we failed to find her together, we divided into groups of two. And when that didn't work, we split up individually, each taking a life vest, flashlight, and a blowhorn to alert each other in case of danger. I decided to descend the search around the mountain's base. After 30 minutes of trudging against the gale and through the mud, I discovered a wide cave, within which was utter darkness. As I stared at the mouth, I heard a woman's whimper, followed by what I can only describe as a deep, throaty cough that lasted a few seconds too long. Or was it simply the wind scathing the cave walls? "Hello?" I shouted. I considered using the blowhorn, but decided to confirm what it was before alerting the others. I grabbed my flashlight and continued inside. A damp, fleshy smell shot into my nose. I called the woman's name. Pained whimpers sounded back. I hurried forward and stepped on something sharp that almost split my shoe. I pointed my flashlight at it. A broken cart track. I had entered a mine. Around me, I saw wheelbarrows of ore covered in pounds of dust. I am in a tin mine, and I immediately recalled the story of the aswang that impersonated the miners. A tightness gripped my chest. I did not believe in imagined monsters, but who knows what could have been waiting in the darkness ahead. I wanted to turn and run, but pushed on, reminding myself why I was here. I was here to save people. The whimpering was just ahead. I wish I could snap my fingers and teleport back to the hotel, where I could hide underneath the silky duvet on the Super King bed. How cozy it would be to wait out the storm there. My heartbeat surged as I squeezed my flashlight to settle the trembles. I stepped onward and shined my light forward. A pregnant woman lay writhing on the floor. Above her stood the same pockmark-faced man who'd been waving his arms earlier. He hunched over her, his mouth widened, and slobber dripped from it. "Hello?" I said. Glad you found her. Is she all right?" He ignored me, his mouth stretched beyond what was humanly possible, while emitting a throaty wail. And then a hand slithered out of his mouth. The arm the hand was attached to had 3 elbows, and they bent at odd angles. as it stretched toward his wife's ripe belly. I pulled out my blowhorn and pressed. It blared like the trumpet of Judgment Day, echoing against the cave walls. The thing snapped its head towards me. The hand, coming out of its mouth, contorted with bony snaps until all three elbows straightened. It grabbed at my face, just missing as I backed away and turned. I'd said I'd always want to help people, but in that moment, as my heart quavered and panic engulfed every sense, I only wanted to help myself. I ran. I ran until I was out of the cave and breathless, back amid the deluge. Instead of climbing up the mountain, I sprinted through the jungle toward the village, which was nearly submerged and drifting with the tide. Water reached my waist, but still I trudged through, my life vest keeping me from drowning. And then the current swept me. It carried me through a thicket of downed trees, washed away nipa huts and plastic. Though terrifying, this was heaven compared to facing the creature in that cave. Half an hour later, some brave volunteers in a paddle boat rescued me. I told them I was running from an aswang, but they laughed, thinking me some crazy foreigner. I spent a few days in a shelter, then returned to Cebu, resigned from the charity, and once the storm had passed, took the first flight home. A while later, I heard from a colleague that the villagers survived, save for one pregnant woman who had gone missing. I've had 7 years to think about it since then, but my conclusion never changes. By ignoring the village captain's warning and guiding them to that cursed mountain, I caused something unmentionable to happen to that woman and her unborn child. I'd done exactly the opposite of what I'd yearned to do. I'd hurt instead of helped because of my arrogance. The guilt still eats at me. I don't dare try to help anyone anymore, and I'm a corporate drone now, slaving every day to make someone else rich. Better than hurting others with my good intentions. If you guys enjoyed the stories, don't forget to like and subscribe. It would help me out a lot. If you have any suggestions and recommendations, write them down in the comment section below. All the sources from the stories can be found in the description box. Once again, thank you guys and see you in the next one.